Greetings and salutations, folks, and welcome once again, as always, to another helping of Mr H's Hot Pot. You join me today, making my way through the fields of the village of Standish, which is not too far away from my hometown of Wigan, just a couple of miles away from the town centre. And I've come today, Hot Potters, for a bit of a Twixmas bimble. Today is Boxing Day. All the madness of Christmas is behind us. I hope Santa brought you everything that your little heart desired over Christmas, and I hope that it's been a good one for you, and it will be into the new year. But seeing as it's Boxing Day and it is the Christmas period, I thought it was only fitting that really I should do a video, if I'm going to do one, that is sort of religiously connected. Now, the village of Standish is a very old village. There's mention of it right back in the 1200s, and it goes beyond that, they believe. And the village of Standish, unsurprisingly, used to have a lord of the manor by the name of Standish. He gave his name to the village, and it's stuck, and it's been there ever since. And the family of Standish used to reside not too far away from where I'm now walking. And they're so old, the family, that there's even connections with the founding fathers of America, with a gentleman by the name of Miles Standish. And they saw the way through the Reformation. They was devoutly Catholic, and needless to say, once Henry VIII come to the throne and he started off reshaping the church and forming the Church of England, Catholicism fell out of favour in this country. And as they had been such long-standing members of the Catholic Church and had given money to it, it earmarked them as basically Catholic sympathisers. So the card was marked, as we say nowadays. And they found themselves in a rather bizarre position where they owned a piece of land that had been seized by the Crown because they had gifted it to the Catholic Church, and he had to rent it back from the Crown. Otherwise, the Crown would have just sold it to the highest bidder. It was that mercenary back in them days. Anyway, that's a story and another location for another video. Today, we're concerned with finding the ruins of a building that was known as the Hermitage here in Standish. And what the Hermitage was, it had been built and gifted to the Catholic Church. You would have think the family would have learned the lesson from last time, but no. They built a house for the priest of the day to live in. A bit like a vicarage is in the Church of England, and it was located halfway between the first Catholic church in Standish and where the Standish family resided, Standish Hall. And they had a Catholic chapel built on their site, as did a lot of landowners back in the day. And the idea of this was twofold. Number one, there would be somewhere for the priest to live, and they wouldn't be too far away, so they would always have the ear of the priest, and by extension the ear of God, not too far away from their home. So there was a little bit of self-serving there in building the Hermitage. Now today it's just a pile of bricks hidden in a little wooded area, but I'm going to try and find it today for you, and we'll take a look at it, because apparently there's still little pieces left from them days, amazingly enough. Anyway, I'm now making my way down this rather muddy path, and it's a little bit stony and loose underfoot, so I'm going to cut the film here and I'll pick it up once we get to where I believe the Hermitage used to stand. So join me in a moment. And here we have a little notice board that's been set up by the Standish Community Forum that marks the site of the Hermitage. That's how I know where it is, besides looking at old maps, of course. And it simply states, the Hermitage. This area was the site of a large house provided by the Standish family for Catholic priests who served their chapel at nearby Standish Hall from about 1838 and from 1884 at St Mary's Church. In 1908 it was replaced by the new presbytery adjoining the church, Standish Community Forum. And pretty much that sort of condenses the history of this site. But I'm now going to make my way into the woods beyond, which is just through there, and we'll be able to see the ruins of the old Hermitage. So let's crack on, because it's getting a bit busy here with Boxing Day walkers walking the dogs. So, Hot Potters, According to the old Ordnance Survey maps from about 1914, which I'll put a screenshot in for you now. We should be roughly where the entrance to the driveway to the Hermitage used to be. Now there is a path making its way through, so I'll use that. But all about here, somewhere used to be the gate ports into the Hermitage. Sadly, those are long gone. No doubt they was removed when they demolished this building, which was sometime, I believe, around the 1940s through to the 60s. There are photographs online which throughout this video I'll use, and they show families residing in this house in the 1920s. Now, according to the National Archives, the priest of the day back in, I think it was 1802, he advised the Standish family to demolish this house as it wasn't fit for 2 people to live in. It was too big for that, but it wasn't big enough to become a farm. For whatever reason, the Standish family ignored that advice, and the house continued to stand here for a further 100 to 120 years. But once that new presbytery was built on St Mary's Church, which we'll take a look at towards the end of this video, the Lady of Our Annunciation, I believe it's called, they didn't need this house anymore, and as such it was then rented out privately to people, and if you had enough money you could rent it off the Standish family. No doubt it brought in a little bit of money to the ever dwindling coffers of the Standish family, because once we reached into the late 19th, early 20th century, all these powerful families was losing the money for some reason or other. They just seemed to die out, didn't they? But this is an amazing plot of land. It's quite big, this little wooded area. No doubt all these trees that you can see have sprung up in the intervening years since the house was demolished. But I'll just whip the camera around and you'll just see how big and how peaceful this area really is. Just look at that. There's nothing like the sound of birdsong in the morning, is there? And with it being Boxing Day and everybody's still got the Christmas hangover, I don't mean alcoholic, you know, they've been pooked out by the festivities if they've got large families. There's hardly anybody out, only dog walkers. There've been a number of those today, and it seems this is the dog walking time in Standish. I've had a number of hounds of various breeds bound up to me whilst making this video, and 1 or 2 people showing a bit of interest. The only problem with that is if you get into too much conversation with people, you lose out on time. Anyway, we're making our way down this, and I do wonder why they didn't put the gate closer to the house as I make my way through this. But all of this now is part of a public footpath, and depending when this public footpath was established, maybe back in the day you would have made your way through this holy ground, so to speak. Yeah, it's quite a few relics still here. There's a little bit of brickwork here, see. Let's make that out there. No idea what that would be. When I've looked on the maps, the house is further in front of me. So whether or not that was a little bit of a garden ornament at one time or another, who knows? And I wonder who owns this bit of land now. No doubt once Standish Hall, a farm stands where the hall used to be, it no longer stands, it was sold off. Again, I shall put some photographs in for you now of what Standish Hall looked like back in the day. And I believe, slowly but surely, it was stripped of anything valuable and all that was sold off. So, who knows why this little bit of land never got sold with it, because obviously the Standish family would have owned it. Or maybe they did, and whoever owns it just didn't want to do anything with it. But I'm now making my way to where the ruins are. We can actually see them. So I'll whip the camera off, the old selfie stick, I'll get it on the tripod, and we'll take a look at these ruins now, because there's quite a bit of substantial ruins, and from some of the old brickwork, you can actually make out parts of what was once this grandiose house that used to stand here. And here we go, hot potters. This pile of bricks that are all moss covered and with trees growing out of them is all that remains of the old Hermitage, which used to be the place where the priests used to live here in Standish. And as I pan round here, you can see how close it is to the main path, and it does make you wonder why there was no gateway into this area at the time. Now I believe this was the back of the house, or it would have been back in the day. So maybe that's why. Perhaps there was a little foot gate, little cut through. And there's lots of bricks here. It is a little bit hard to make out on the camera, but you can even make out where there would have been a little cobbled path back in the day. Those stones there, you can see that they would have formed a pathway through here. And some of the rubble here, you can still make out on this one here, where there would have been a windowsill. I'll put a photograph in of what this house used to look like, and I'll circle it, and you'll be able to see that it is indeed that, one of the old windowsills. No idea if it was actually the one that I've circled, but you can see the style of it. And it's amazing that this rubble hasn't been cleared away. Now, back in the 1920s, when they used to demolish buildings, where today you'd just get somebody track in here with a 20-ton machine, and within an hour they'd have flattened the house. You used to get people would come in and they'd try and salvage as much as they could, slate, etc. But they'd pretty much demolish it by hand, and that's why a lot of it used to just get left behind. Obviously, whoever had this house demolished didn't want to pay for it to be all cleared away. And across here, you can actually make out how the building would have been formed, because the walls have just been collapsed in. And it probably just got to a stage where this house simply became too expensive to maintain. And they probably had problems getting people willing to pay the rent they was asking, so it stood empty, and it got into this state where it was needing to be demolished and abandoned. But what I am going to do, hot potters, I'm going to make a mental note. I always say this in these videos, but I am going to return to this area with a metal detector at some point, because it must be fascinating what lays beneath our feet here. All this history, as I believe this was even used, this house, as a school in the days before state education. The Catholic Church actually allowed them to hold schools here, and they provided education. No doubt with a Catholic flavour, but any education was better than none back in them days. Look at it, amazing. It's so peaceful. And as I say, it is a big parcel of land, this. I'm surprised it's not been cleared and sold off, really. Perhaps returned back to a grazeland. I mean, it would make ideal stables. You could put horses on here if you cleared all this off, I suppose. And this is what I'm talking about, hot potters, when I say treasures beneath your feet. Just here on the surface is a little piece of cast iron, which doesn't look much at first glance, but when you take a closer look at it, you can see a little bit of fancy scrolling in it there, which suggests to me that that has probably been part of an old cast iron fireplace, possibly from one of the bedrooms because it doesn't look as though it's been very big. Just left here and abandoned. Probably tried to get that out and it's broke, being cast. It's very brittle cast iron, as anybody out there knows. So they just threw it to one side. And there must be all kinds of little things hidden beneath our feet. And the beauty of this site is it's off the beaten path. People don't really see you, they just walk past. So it's ideal for a little explore with a metal detector. I probably shouldn't say that, as number one, you should always get permission before you come to a place, and number two, if there is any metal detectors, they might beat me to it and get down here themselves. If you do, please let me know in the comments if you manage to find anything. Here's another foundation of a little building. Could have been a storage area, maybe even a toilet back in the day, but it looks a bit big for a toilet, this. So I'd suggest it was probably a little storage area. But the Standish family certainly looked after the clergy. They weren't afraid to shell out. And as I said earlier in this video, it bit them on the arse. Once the Reformation came, they couldn't really deny it, could they? And there's some other big chunks of wall there, just left on the top. More blocks of rendered brickwork and some pieces of stone here. Whether those would have been lintels or cornerstones back in the day, who knows. And there's even a concrete drainage channel. I think that's a drainage channel looking at it. Used to call them acres back in my day when I was building. Whether or not that's modern and has found its way into this site or not, who knows. You can see lots of markings on bits of stone and brickwork there. It sort of indicates that those would have been a detailed part of this home. Once again, another pile of bricks there that indicates another little outhouse of some description. And it would appear that how they demolished these buildings was strip the roof, like the one I'm stood in here, and then just collapse the walls in on themselves and leave it. Probably the intention was to return here at some point and clear it, but cost or whatever prohibited that. Take a closer look at these pieces of wall, and you can see how you can just make out lines there. They've been cement rendered to give the impression of being stone blocks. And I'm now stood on what would have been the main part of the house. But beneath these bricks, like I said, there could be all kinds of treasures. Certainly worth coming down here for a further explore, I think. Obviously there's little modern day bits and pieces that have been dragged in here. No doubt kids coming here making little fires and things. You can see evidence of that over there. Probably doing a bit of wild camping. And just through those two trees there, that's where St Mary's Church is, and the presbytery that replaced this site that I'm stood on. And we'll now make our way over to and take a quick look at before we wrap this video up, I think. Now, as I leave the ruins of the old Hermitage in those woods at the side of me there, there's only one thing that still bears the name of the Hermitage in this area, and it's a pond. Apparently it's a fishing pond, so I'm going to see if we can find it now. According to what bit I've managed to glean off the internet, Standish Hall and that farm is in front of me way over there. I'm not going to make my way to that. There's nothing to see there, to be honest. It's a brand new build, but that's where the old hall used to stand. But the pond should be down here, so let's see if we can get down there and see if it still bears the name of the Hermitage Pond. Make my way through one of these kissing gates here. Always close it behind you. And we'll make our way down here. And as you can see, here in my hometown of Wigan on this Boxing Day morning of 2023, it is a lovely day. There are a number of people out stretching their legs. And we've all been cooped in really because of the winds. We got battered by those storms. No idea what name they're up to now. You lose count, don't you? By the time you get past them. You seem to go through alphabet about 3 times in a year now. Where at one time there was a novelty if you got strong winds. And I believe this pond is just in a little ditch here. Just over here. It's accessible to the public, I believe. No doubt, if there's any fish in there, it'll have been turned into a little fishery. And it must sadden these lords of the manors if they could come back, if they could rise from the grave and see what has happened to the beloved former estates, as they've been decimated. Wigan used to have lots of them, but there's a lot of places now, there's housing estates on them. Norley Hall used to have a hall called Norley Hall. Ortley Hall was another. That's where they get the names from. Anyway, I'll try and find this pond now, and then we'll make our way up to the church, which I believe was built in 1884 and is a classic example of the Victorian red Gothic style terracotta bricks buildings that they used to build back in that era. And this is it. This is the Hermitage Pond, Hot Potters. Not too far away from that site that we've just been to, which is just in them trees there. Now I've no idea why this is called the Hermitage Pond, whether or not it's a local name that the Standishes have given it, because all it appears to be is a little endpoint to a drainage channel that runs along there from the fields. And whether or not there's any fish in there, I've no idea. If anybody from Standish is watching this, maybe you could tell me that. Right then, I'm going to hop over that fence there I just climbed over at the end of that little path there, and we're going to make our way back up there, Hot Potters, back to the main road. So come on, let's take a look at this church and wrap this one up. Well, Hot Potters, you now join me on the public footpath that leads from the Hermitage site up to the Catholic church site, St Mary's, here in Standish. And I do not envy those priests of yesteryear who must have used this very same footpath leading from where they lived up to the church, and they would have probably had to make this journey on a daily basis, as it is the muddiest field in Lancashire. It really is, especially this time of year. Beneath my feet it's like the Somme during the First World War. But I'm now at the top of the hill. Obviously all the water runs down Brew towards where the Hermitage used to stand. And I'll just whip the camera around now and you'll be able to see the back of St Mary's Church and the presbytery that replaced the Hermitage. And there it is, Hot Potters. Quite an impressive building, as these old terracotta Accrington stock bricks that we used to call them in the building trade these buildings that are built out of them, they are very impressive. And it's obvious that there was a church here before this one. This one was built in 1884, as I say. So there would have been a church here beforehand, because apparently the records date back to the early 1700s at least. So there would have been another building here, as there is a graveyard attached to this particular church. So some of the graves will predate the actual church, which proves that there would have been another building here beforehand. Sadly, there's very little history of this church online, surprisingly enough. But I'm just making my way to the gate now. I'll step through it, we'll get on the main road, and we'll be able to see this church and its presbytery in all its glory. You know, I do wish this would have been a Church of England site, because vicarage is a lot easier to say. Anyway, I'll get through the gate and we'll do the end little bit of this video. And here we are. This is the Lady of our Annunciation, St Mary's of Standish. And there is the building that replaced the old Hermitage, and that one looks quite an impressive building. I can just see through the windows there some old crooked trusses that would support the roof. And this church is part of the Diocese of Liverpool, which is rather odd seeing as we're in Greater Manchester now and Lancashire beforehand, but that's the way the church broke it up. Very impressive building. As is the quarters for the priest. You could lose yourself in that building, couldn't you? Anyway, I'll whip the camera around and wrap this video up. Well, up Potters, there you go. That was a look at the old Hermitage site here in Standish, not far from the hometown of Wigan. I hope you've enjoyed today's video and today's little bimble on this Boxing Day morning. I've certainly enjoyed stretching the legs and getting back in front of the camera after a little bit of an hiatus due to the preparations for Christmas and the bad weather. So, all that's left for me to say is, until the next time, from myself, Mr. H, which hopefully won't be as long, it is bye-bye for now.